Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit here with some Star Wars The Old Republic content. Welcome to my ship, the D5 Mantis Patrol Craft. There are many like it, but this one is mine. So I'm going to give you a brief tour of this hub area that you gain. As to when you gain it, it very much depends on what class you're actually playing, but you do gain it fairly early on. By fairly early on, I'm very much talking in MMO relative terms here, so yeah, you'll be playing for quite a few hours before you get hold of one of these, but the purpose of it is to serve as a hub area for all of your activities. You get a droid right there that will not so much smart-mouth you. He's very humble, he's very subservient, he's useful as a crafting bitch. That's what I've found him useful for at any rate. Everyone gets one of those. The rest of the companions are pretty much unique to the class that you happen to be playing. There's also an escape pod, which I can't use to get away from that guy. That saddens me. You have access to the cargo hold, which is essentially your bank. You can put all of your crafting materials in here, by the way. You don't have to carry them around with you. And crew members will be able to craft from the bank. You don't need to worry about carrying mats around with you. That's pretty dumb, and the Old Republic realized that that was outmoded, and as such they removed it. The interior of this ship is very utilitarian, as I think you can probably figure out. I've had a couple of guys telling me that the Sith Inquisitor ship is extremely luxurious and has far too much space. The D5 Mantis certainly not. Aside from that, all of the ships do perform identically and have the same function, and you'll find your crew members hanging around here as you acquire them. However, the two really important functions of this can be accessed through the captain's chair. One is travel from planet to planet. It's pretty much vital for that cause. I believe you might be able to do some of it through the Imperial Fleet location via shuttle, but most of it you're going to want to be doing through your ship anyway. And it also gives access to the subject of this video, which is space combat. So, space combat in this game is effectively an on-rail Star Fox style shooter. And there are various missions available depending on what level you are. And if you think bombing runs in World of Warcraft and take them to their logical conclusion of actually having real support in the engine for them, then this is what you would get. And in this case, I'm going to be demonstrating a couple of missions for you. Alright, so this is my ship. I can move my ship from left to right, up and down. I can also do a barrel roll, which is very important if you're going to play a Star Fox clone. And the purpose of this mission is to follow the mission directives. Engage the leader of the squadron and blow up the elite members, and also there's a bonus objective to blow up a certain number of turrets and fighters. Now, I currently have access to concussion missiles and also blasters. As you can see right there, I can hold down the button in order to fire my blasters. All of this has to be manually aimed. There are no hotkeys in space combat. This is properly coded into the game engine, as opposed to, say, bombing runs, which were put into World of Warcraft as something of an afterthought, really. So I'm not blaming Blizzard for that. You can't simply alter the engine just on the fly, and this game was built with this idea in mind, so it has support in pretty much as standard. Now, flying up, down, left, and right is kind of important. You can't just go straight ahead. You will end up crashing into a rock, as I will demonstrate very, very shortly, and that's going to do damage to your ship. You want to watch out for that. Doing the barrel roll does also have a purpose as well. It helps you try and evade enemy fire. As far as I'm concerned, you should be barrel rolling whenever you're under fire, and there we go. We're just going to crash into this and take some damage there and just show you what happens. You will fail the mission, of course, if your ship is disabled. Simple as that. Now, in terms of the weapons you've got, as I say, you do have blasters and concussion missiles. Those have a limited number in your bay, and they will run out. You can upgrade your ship in order to get more missiles. You can launch 4 at a time, and they also tend to lock on to those spots there that are highlighted in red. They're useful for taking out turrets or particularly tough or evasive targets. Aside from that, you can take them out with blasters without too much of a problem. Now, when it comes to using your blasters, you can't just really hold down the button, because if you do, the shields will not recharge. So your shields and your blasters are pretty much on the same power link, and as such, if you fire one, you're not going to be recharging the other. Alright, so we can try and take him out with some missiles, do a little bit of damage. He almost got away, but not too much of a problem. We should be able to take him out. And a few more missiles should finish him off. You get XP, as you can see, for pretty much every kill, and the bonus objectives will give you additional experience. Now, a lot of these missions are available as daily quests from the terminal, and you can pick those up for additional fleet commendations, which are the currency system which is used in the Old Republic for space combat, and can be traded in for a variety of different things, including ship upgrades, some unique armor, and at the moment, randomized lockboxes, which is a feature of the Old Republic. You can invest a lot of currency. If you've got, say, nothing else to spend your tokens on from a particular planet, you can basically roll the dice and see if you get anything good from a randomized lockbox. And I believe there's actually an artifact level lockbox. That's a very, very high level of item, which costs 350 commendations. So if you want to roll the dice and get an artifact, then yeah, you can do it. So there is always a purpose to doing this, but it very much is a sort of a side thing to do. It's something to maybe do your daily quests on and then just leave alone. Now, the initial space combat is not particularly hard, I have to say. After you buy your first set of upgrades, which is incredibly easy to do, you can go to the Imperial or Republic fleet and go to the vendor, and you can buy a full set of level 1 upgrades with barely any credits whatsoever. They're pretty much essential, I feel, for engaging the first few missions without any risk of dying. You won't have a problem with these early missions. They do get significantly harder to the point where, yes, you will lose frequently, especially if you're not heavily upgraded and you're not deliberately targeting the right things, as well as recharging your shields at the right time and trying to barrel roll and dodge out of the way of incoming fire. Some of the missions, I've got to say, are fairly epic. This is probably one of the worst. The next one that I'm going to show you has got some fairly awesome set pieces. I mean, you can notice that graphically it's quite impressive to begin with, and the backdrops and the way that the capital ships are in terms of their scale is extremely impressive. The next mission, I think, will impress you just a little bit more in that regard, because capital ships are actually warping in as you go in, and it's absolutely massive seeing these things just appear in front of you. Trying to avoid some fire from that space station over there, take down a few more fighters just for the sake of doing it. And pretty much all of these missions seem to be 5 minutes in length. So there's a set time, you have to survive till the end and complete the objectives, and then you warp out, and that is it. So I haven't seen any missions which are longer than 5 minutes. I don't know if they exist, but honestly, it's good that they don't, because I feel that this would get very monotonous if that were the case. Now, the question is, am I disappointed with space combat in the Old Republic? I don't know. I mean, honestly, it's not particularly complex, and there's not a huge amount to it. There's more as you go through the game, especially when you start buying upgrades. You can buy things like electronic warfare pods, proton torpedoes, to give you a few more combat options here and there, and in the harder missions, those do prove to be invaluable. And the early missions, though, it is very, very simplistic. Once again, kind of like a bombing run. It's just designed as a minor diversion and a way to earn commendations, credits, and experience without necessarily having to go and do your normal missions on the ground. It's good that it's there as an option. I like the fact that it is in the game, and what kind of excites me is the possibility to expand this system. I mean, it's obvious, as you can see, that the engine is pretty good for what it does. When it comes to on-rail space combat, it works well. It's smooth, it is actually skill-based, there are no hotkeys involved in this. That's a good thing. That really, really is. That's not something you see in an awful lot of MMOs. And some will point out, obviously, the jump to light speed with Star Wars Galaxies was far more complex, and I would agree. It was. I would love to see the Old Republic develop something similar in terms of having actual PvP space combat, having freedom of movement. Would it be that hard? I don't know. It's nice that the 3D engine is in the game that is evidently capable of doing it, though. I think that there's all sorts of possibilities for expanding this system into something way more major and actually having full-on PvP fleet battles. That, I think, would be wonderful. And, of course, additional upgrades and things like that. Maybe ways to customize your ship in terms of stats more than just buying a bunch of linear upgrades. I mean, all you really do now is buy grades 1 through 5. We could have rare upgrades with different characteristics and things like that. That sounds like something I could get behind. At the moment, it's just an interesting diversion. And I don't think the game suffers from it being there. Indeed, I believe that it benefits from it. As a Star Wars game, it's kind of wrong to not have space combat, I feel. And it's good that it's got it in some form. It's certainly better than the turret sections from Knights of the Old Republic, I can tell you that for a fact. It's also better than the swoop riding nonsense. I remember that. That was not particularly good at all. They've implemented this into the engine in a much more smooth fashion than any of the stuff that they've put in before into Knights of the Old Republic games, the little mini-games. I think the only thing this game is really missing in terms of mini-games is Pazak. God knows, where is Pazak? Give. I think people would go insane for that. I mean, hell, even EverQuest put in a collectible card game. It seems like something that they would want to invest in at some point as a diversion. But as you can see, it's visually impressive. You've got ships warping in, you've got laser fire going off. There's a definite amount of authenticity in this as far as I'm concerned. The ships handle very easily with the mouse controls. Not as realistic as I would like. It would be nice to have a little bit more complexity into the flight model, but once again, I have to wonder if there's any room for expansion there. Now, what I will say is that quite a few of the missions are just harder variants of each other. For instance, there's a version of this which has more ships, where the ships are shielded and things like that. You don't tend to get those at low levels. That's what happens when you go higher up, and definitely adding more space combat missions in would be kind of nice. But once again, if you're going to talk about kind of a daily quest, then you don't need a huge amount of variety, especially when this is a little bit dynamic. It's nowhere near as repetitive as, say, a bombing run would be, simply because there is actually a certain degree of skill in it, and while you have the same flight patterns and the same enemies come at you here and there, you can always perform slightly differently. I'd like to see maybe a little bit more variation, because obviously there's a lot of cool scripted stuff where the ships actually warp in, but I believe all of the fighters come in at the same time every time, so if they were to throw a little bit of randomization in there and just make things a little bit interesting, maybe have mini-bosses appear at random. If you're doing really well, maybe say, oh, I'm just going to throw something particularly crazy at you. That would be cool. I think that would certainly give a greater degree of replayability to the system. As it stands, this is the kind of thing that I'll probably just do the dailies for and find fairly enjoyable as a diversion, as a side project, but I'm not going to dedicate a huge amount of time to. You can earn a title very, very quickly by doing one of these missions, and you can also, of course, earn those commendations there. Aside from that, though, it's not really worth investing a huge amount of time into. You can have a look at the ship screen. This gives you an impression of the equipment that's available. I've got grade 1 of everything there, and there are 4 pieces of special equipment that you can see, and that's the ship stats. And all of these go from grade 1 through to a grade 5 when it comes to the upgrades. There is also those 4 items there, which are special items which can be activated. The proton torpedoes, power converter module, as well as the EMP and electronic warfare pod. And these do give you various consumables that can be used during a fight, and of course do recharge after you've finished it. But there you go. Space Combat is essentially a modernized set of bombing runs, and it's fairly fun for what it is, an interesting diversion. I'll see you next time.